All right, welcome back to the deep dive. So you sent in this fantastic stack of sources on the architecture of arguments, and this feels like the most essential thing we could possibly be talking about right now.
It really is. It's fundamental.
We're all just overwhelmed by public debate, by people making assertions, but today we're giving you the blueprint.
Exactly. The goal is to move past just, stating opinions and to start seeing arguments for what they are, like math equations.
It's time to start thinking in code.
And the basic unit of that code, the first thing you need to look for is the syllogism.
The syllogism. Okay, that sounds a bit academic.
It does, but it's not. It's really just a diagnostic checklist. It's got three simple parts: premise 1, premise 2.
And the conclusion.
Right. Premise 1 is your big general rule, your major truth. Premise 2 is the specific fact, the piece of data you're plugging into that rule.
And the conclusion just sort of falls out of that combination.
It has to. It's the only possible outcome. Let's use the classic Socrates example. It just shows the inevitability so well.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Premise 1, all men are mortal.
Okay, accepted.
Premise 2, Socrates is a man.
Right. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. It's an airtight logical box.
It is. If you accept P1 and P2, the conclusion must be true. There is no logical escape.
The second you start thinking that way, you see how much of public debate is just sloppy. But you flag this distinction between valid and sound as being really dangerous.
This is the critical trap. This is where people will try to trick you.
How does that work?
Okay, so an argument is valid if the structure is correct. Meaning, if the premises were true, the conclusion would follow. The internal logic holds up.
Wait, hold on. So the premises can be completely false, but the argument is still considered valid?
Precisely. And that's the trap. The logic can be perfect, even if it's built on total nonsense.
Can you give us some examples?
Sure, let's use that hypothetical about the cat. Premise 1, all cats have 5 legs.
Okay, which is obviously not true.
Obviously. But stay with the structure. Premise 2, my pet is a cat.
Okay, so, conclusion. Therefore, my pet has 5 legs.
See? The argument is perfectly valid. The structure is flawless, but it's not sound.
Because the starting point, premise 1, is just false in the real world.
Exactly. An argument is only sound if it's both valid and the premises are actually true. Soundness is the gold standard.
Yeah.
That's what you want for your own arguments.
So if soundness is what you want for your own, what's the best tool for taking someone else's apart? The sources pointed to something called modus tollens.
Ah, yes. The method of denying.
It sounds aggressive.
It's incredibly powerful because you're not attacking their premise head on. You're attacking the necessary consequence of their premise.
So how does that work?
The structure is simple. If P is true, then Q must happen. But then you demonstrate that Q is not true or impossible.
And, therefore, P must be false. You kill the cause by disproving the effect.
You got it. Let's use it on that claim. The universe is eternal. It has no beginning.
Okay, let's dismantle it.
We set up the link. If the universe had no beginning, P, then we would have had to cross an infinite amount of time to get to today, Q.
Right, an infinite past.
But you can't cross an infinite amount of time. You can never reach the finish line of now. So that's not Q.
And because Q is impossible, the original premise, P, must be false.
Which means the universe must have had a beginning. You've cornered them logically.
Wow. Okay, but what about when the structure itself is just broken from the start?
That's the most common flaw you'll find in the wild. It's the non sequitur.
It does not follow.
The conclusion just leaps out of nowhere. Like that example from the sources. Evolution is true, therefore God does not exist.
Right. You hear versions of that constantly.
You got premise 1, evolution is a biological explanation. Then a giant leap to the conclusion. God does not exist. There's a huge piece missing.
The hidden premise 2.
Exactly. The speaker is secretly inserting an unstated premise, something like, anything explained by biology cannot also have a supernatural creator.
Which is a massive, highly debatable philosophical claim they never actually say out loud.
And because they skip it, the conclusion simply doesn't follow. The chain is broken.
So, what's the big takeaway for everyone listening?
It's about performing the detection drill. In every single debate you hear, from now on.
Stop listening to what people are saying.
And start listening for the structure. P1, P2, conclusion. Is it valid? Are the premises sound?
And if not, your job is to find that invisible premise that's doing all the heavy lifting.
Right. And that brings us to the final thought we want to leave you with.
Think about any common public argument you hear all the time.
What is the one hidden, unstated premise that you and everyone else just assume is true.
And what happens to that entire argument if you decide to deny that one premise, mull that over?
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're focusing on one of the most powerful advantages you can have in any discussion. It's all about understanding the burden of proof. It is, I think, the ultimate intellectual shortcut.
It really is. I mean, most people get the golden rule, right? He who asserts must prove. That part's easy.
Sure.
But the real power, the strategic part, is knowing that having no position is your safest place. If you just say, I don't know, or I'm not convinced, you have zero burden. None.
That's what sets up the classic rookie mistake. You see it everywhere. Someone will say, X is an absolute fact.
Mm-hmm.
And when you just show a little doubt, they immediately flip it and say, well, prove it's not a fact.
That is the trap. The second you try to prove a negative, you've accepted their burden. And you've done it unfairly. They made the positive claim. It's on them to provide the evidence first. If they haven't done that, you have nothing to disprove.
Okay, so if that's the trap, we need a couple of tools. A default setting and a quick way to dismiss bad claims. So for defense, what's our intellectual starting point?
It has to be the null hypothesis. We borrow it straight from science.
Right.
It's the default position of no relationship, the status quo. So if a colleague claims, our new ad campaign doubled sales, the null hypothesis says we assume it had no effect, not until they show us the actual data. It saves a ton of energy because you start from skepticism, not from belief.
That makes perfect sense for things you can measure.
Yeah.
But what about the really wild claims? The kind of assertions that seem to exist just for shock value. If the null hypothesis is our shield, what's our sword?
That's where you pull out Hitchens' razor. It's clean, it's efficient, and it is lethal. The razor just states, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
Okay, let's make that practical. Say someone claims every major cryptocurrency is secretly controlled by 4 billionaires in Liechtenstein. I mean, you could spend a month trying to disprove that.
You could. Or you just ask for the proof. The bank transfers, the emails, anything concrete. And when they can't produce it, which, they won't, you just apply the razor. You dismiss the claim. You don't argue against it. You keep your energy.
Exactly. And once you master that, you can actually go on a kind of subtle offense. Pro-debaters call it the ping pong tactic. The goal is simple, right? Ask questions. Don't make statements.
Yes, this is such a critical distinction. The bad move is making a counter-assertion. Let's say someone argues renewable energy is impossible. A weak response would be, you're wrong. Solar panels are 100% efficient now.
And now you're on the hook. You have to defend the physics of solar tech. You just took the burden.
You took the burden. The effective move, the Socratic trap, is just to ask a question. Instead of asserting, you ask. Okay, so given current photovoltaic limits, how would you solve for the energy density we'd need in a city?
Perfect. You haven't made a claim at all. You just forced them to use their energy to defend their own argument with specifics.
Yeah.
You stay safe, asking questions. So for you, the listener, this comes down to something really simple. Just asking, what specifically leads you to that conclusion? Or maybe, can you walk me through how you verified that? It pushes the evidence obligation right back where it belongs. On them.
It does, and that brings us to a final assignment for you. Let's call it the why drill. Sometime today, just find someone making a strong opinion. Taxes are too high. That policy will ruin the economy.
Anything.
And don't argue. Just genuinely ask. What evidence or data led you to that conclusion?
Well,
I think you'll be really surprised how few people are actually prepared to carry the burden of proof for their own thoughts. Our deep dive today is, it's essentially a survival guide for the comment section.
Oh, absolutely.
We've gathered some sources that are just perfect for identifying the most common ways people attack you online instead of, the idea you're talking about.
And if you spend any time online, you know the first one. It's where the conversation just breaks down, the ad hominem.
Which is Latin for to the man, right?
Exactly. It's the classic sign, really, that someone has just completely run out of logical ammunition.
So how do you spot it? I mean, what's the clearest sign they've given up on logic and are just focused on you?
It's all in the conclusion they draw. The structure is, it's pretty simple. Person A makes a claim. Let's call it claim X.
Okay.
Then person B just attacks person A's character. They'll say they're stupid or biased or ugly, whatever.
And then the salty leap.
That's it. Then person B concludes that claim X must be false just because this flawed person said it.
That's such an important jump to recognize, and our sources have this extreme example to make it crystal clear.
They do, and it's extreme for a reason. I mean, if a truly terrible person says 2 + 2 = 4, they're still right. Their character, no matter how awful, just cannot change a basic mathematical fact. The truth of the statement is totally independent of the speaker.
Okay, so speaking of these attacks, the sources point to an even, I'd say, cleverer version of this, the genetic fallacy.
The sophisticated cousin.
Right. This one doesn't attack you now, it attacks where your belief came from, the origin.
Yeah, and the classic example you always see is in debates about faith. They call it the atheist trap.
What's that?
It's when someone says, you only believe in Jesus because you were born in America. If you were born in India, you'd be a Hindu.
And I can see why that sounds so powerful. It feels like this, deep sociological takedown of your entire worldview.
It does, but it's a complete misdirection.
Why does it fail as an argument?
Because your geography, your upbringing, all that explains is how you were exposed to an idea. It tells us absolutely nothing about whether that idea is actually true or false.
You can totally flip that logic on its head, too. The counterexample from the sources is perfect.
It is.
You only believe the Earth is round because you were born in the 21st century. If you were born in 1000 BC, you'd believe it was flat.
Exactly. Does where you were born change the shape of the planet? Of course not.
So the rebuttal is pretty straightforward then.
It is. My geography explains my exposure to the idea, but it doesn't determine if the idea is true. Simple as that.
This all leads to a really specific type that C.S. Lewis actually gave a name to. He called it bulverism.
Right, which is where your opponent just skips the debate entirely and jumps straight to playing amateur psychologist.
So they don't even bother with the evidence.
Not at all. They just start explaining why you're wrong, based on what they assume your motives are.
What's an example?
The source nails it. You are just a creationist because you are afraid of death and you need an emotional crutch.
Wow, okay. So they haven't touched a single one of your actual points.
Nope. They've just decided you're emotionally compromised.
And the defense for that seems to be the most direct one of all. Just pull them back to the actual topic.
You have to. You just demand they stick to the evidence. I mean, me being afraid of death doesn't suddenly prove their alternative theory is true. My motivation is irrelevant.
So when you tie all three of these together, ad hominem, the genetic fallacy, and bulverism, what's the common thread?
The common thread is avoidance. They are all, at their core, just elaborate ways to dodge the real argument. They're a distraction because they know they're losing on the actual facts.
And that really is the most useful takeaway from this whole deep dive. The final insight our source offers is just, it's so powerful.
What's that?
When people start insulting you in a debate, your character, where you're from, your secret fears, it almost always means they have run out of logic.
You're winning.
In effect, yeah, you're winning.
So here's the thought for you to take with you, kind of an assignment. Go to a YouTube comment section on a contentious topic. And just count. Count how many comments are pure ad hominem insults versus how many are actual counter-arguments.
The ratio might be a little scary. So that's your mission. Now you have the tools to spot these tricks. Use them wisely.
So for this deep dive, we're giving you a shortcut, a way to spot and defeat debate cheats. We're looking at how people fight ghosts instead of, grappling with real arguments.
Yeah.
The whole point here is to give you the tools to bulletproof your own understanding.
Exactly. And we're starting with maybe the easiest trick in the book. It's the strawman fallacy.
Just strawman.
Right. If you can't defeat the actual complex position your opponent holds, we can call that the real man, you just, you build a much weaker fake version of it.
A man made of straw.
A man made of straw. You knock that down, and then you declare victory for everyone to see. It's a performance.
Okay, so the cheat is really in the substitution. I mean, think about a classic scenario. Something like, say, a debate on evolution.
Oh, perfect example.
So one side might argue there is specific observable evidence of highly coordinated design in the cell. That's the argument.
That's the real man. And instead of engaging with that specific claim about biology, the opponent just pivots. They say, oh, so you believe a magical bearded man in the sky just zapped everything into existence? That's not science.
Right, and they've attacked that ghost argument, but the original claim about the cell.
It's still standing there, untouched.
Okay, so if the straw man is cheap trickery, what's the professional counter tactic? I've heard you talk about this. The steel man.
The steel man, yes.
But here's my question. Why would I ever want to strengthen my opponent's position? I mean, stating their argument better than they did. Doesn't that just help them?
It's a great question, and it feels counterintuitive, I know. But it works for two really crucial reasons. First, it completely disarms them.
How so?
By proving you genuinely understood their argument, maybe even in its strongest form, you build trust. They know you actually listened. They can't accuse you of misrepresenting them.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second, more powerful reason.
Well, when you then proceed to dismantle that steel man, you haven't just beaten some weak shadow.
You've destroyed the absolute best possible version of their case.
Exactly. There's no legitimate fallback position left, and that's why precision is everything. You have to be careful with the language. You say something like,
So if I understand you correctly.
perfect. So if I understand you correctly, you are arguing that natural selection acts as a non-random filter on random mutations. Is that correct? That forces intellectual honesty.
Precision is great, but, what about opponents who don't even want to fight the argument? They just want to change the subject entirely.
That's when you get the red herring.
The red herring.
They aren't trying to weaken your argument. They're throwing a totally unrelated topic into the mix, purely to divert attention. The name comes from dragging a smelly fish across a trail to distract hunting dogs.
I can just picture it. Let's ground this in a scenario. Say you're arguing that the fossil record shows sudden appearances, not gradual change. That's your point. And your opponent, instead of dealing with the fossils, just interrupts and says, but look at the Crusades. Christians were violent in the Middle Ages. That's the real problem.
And it's so tempting, right? You want to jump in and defend the history. You want to chase that fish.
You really do. So what's the defense?
Don't chase the fish. The strategy is to just visualize a laser pointer.
Yeah.
You calmly bring the focus back to the original target. You can acknowledge it briefly. The Crusades were terrible.
Right.
But they have nothing to do with the Cambrian explosion. Let's get back to the fossils. You have to refocus relentlessly.
This all boils down to a really practical test for you listening right now. So you're saying test.
Oh, it's the instant giveaway.
Isn't it? Just watch any political interview. Listen for those 4 words. So what you're saying is 99% of the time, what follows is a straw man.
It happens constantly. A speaker will make a nuanced point, something like, I think men and women have different temperaments on average. And the interviewer jumps in with, so what you're saying is women are inferior and shouldn't be allowed to work.
And your job, based on this deep dive, is to spot that move instantly. Reject their straw man and insist they deal with what you actually said.
You have to correct it immediately. Never, ever let them fight a ghost. Force them to deal with reality.
And here's the final thought I want to leave you with. Mastering the steel man isn't just about winning a debate. It actually forces you to genuinely understand your opponent's position, maybe even better than they do.
That's the real skill.
That commitment to intellectual empathy, to finding the strongest version of an opposing view, that's the most important takeaway. So next time you're watching the news, listen for that. So what you're saying is, phrase, and ask yourself, what ghost are they trying to beat up?
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into one of the most powerful and I think misunderstood errors in logic.
Oh, absolutely. Begging the question.
Right. And most people hear that phrase and think it means this raises a good question.
But that's not it at all, is it? The classic term is petitio principii.
The infinite loop.
Exactly. It's when you assume your conclusion is true inside your own premise.
Yeah.
Where A is true because of B and B is true because of A.
So you've said something that sounds profound, but you've actually delivered 0 new information.
That's it. It's a closed loop.
Okay, so let's unpack this with a really simple example, one we see all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The religious loop. Someone argues a sacred text is the infallible truth.
Right.
And when you ask them why it's infallible,
the proof offered is because the text itself says it is.
And there's your perfect circle.
It is. The analysis there is pretty straightforward. You're using the conclusion that the text is true to prove the premise.
So to make a real argument, you have to break out of that circle.
You have to. You need external evidence. Something like historical corroboration, archaeology, anything that exists outside the statement itself.
But this isn't just an amateur mistake. I mean, we see this in really sophisticated arguments too.
It gets much deeper. The really tricky version is when the circle is so big you can't see it.
Which brings us to a huge one. The very foundation of science.
The uniformity of nature.
Right. We trust science because it works. We trust that gravity will work tomorrow just like it did today.
We do. But the philosophical question is, how do you know the future will resemble the past?
Well, because in all of our past experiences, the future has always resembled the past.
And there it is.
Ah.
You're assuming uniformity to prove uniformity. You're using past results to justify your faith in future results.
So that's the trap.
It is. This is David Hume's famous problem of induction. It's a foundational assumption we make.
You're essentially operating on faith that the rules of the universe won't just change.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads to a really fascinating critique where some philosophers argue that a purely secular worldview has to sort of borrow this idea of a faithful, orderly universe from, say, a Christian worldview where a consistent God guarantees those laws.
An unstated assumption.
A huge one.
Okay, before we wrap up, let's touch on a logical cousin of this, a tautology.
Yeah, they're very similar. A tautology is a statement that is true by definition, but it has zero explanatory power.
It's just a definition pretending to be an explanation.
A perfect example comes from evolutionary language, the phrase, the fittest survive.
Pretty classic.
But if you ask the question, well, who are the fittest?
The answer is the ones who survive.
Right. So what you've actually said is, the survivors survive.
Which tells me absolutely nothing about how or why they survived.
It's a definition, not a mechanism.
So I think the real goal for you listening is to learn how to spot that loop in your own thinking.
And to replace arguments from an internal premise, I just feel it's true, with arguments based on external logic.
So instead of a subjective claim, you build a case.
Exactly. You might argue the universe appears to have a beginning.
Okay, an observable premise.
And everything that has a beginning seems to have a cause.
You're using external principles like causality and cosmology to build to your conclusion.
You're connecting the dots for someone else to follow. And that leads us to the provocative thought we want to leave you with.
All right.
Take one of your own deeply held beliefs. Something non-negotiable for you. It could be political, scientific, personal, anything.
Okay.
Now, if you had to support it using only external, objective logic, no, because I feel it or because it's just obvious.
Stripping away all the internal conviction.
What outside evidence would you actually use? Much harder to answer than you think.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're giving you a shortcut to intellectual self-defense.
That's a good way to put it.
We're going to dive into two of the most common ways arguments completely fall apart. And it's not because the facts are wrong, but because the definitions are, well, they're slippery.
Right. We're talking about linguistic traps.
We're mapping out two big ones today, equivocation and the no true Scotsman fallacy.
And for you listening, this is so important. Critical thinking isn't just memorizing information. It's about spotting these structural weaknesses in a debate.
So you don't get pulled into a loop.
Exactly. Mastering these two concepts is the difference between wasting your time and, getting to clarity almost immediately.
Okay, let's unpack that. First up, equivocation. If you need a label for this, just think of it as the ultimate bait and switch. It's where someone uses the same word to mean two totally different things in the same argument.
And this is so effective in really charged debates. The best example, the classic one, is the word evolution. An argument might start by saying that evolution, let's call it definition A, is just observable change in a population. Changes in allele frequency.
Something that's a scientifically observed fact. No one really argues with that.
Right. It's irrefutable. So they get you to agree. But then, almost in the next breath, they slide into premise 2.
Using the same word.
Using the exact same word, evolution. But now it's definition B, the common descent of all life from a single ancestor. It's a massive, complex claim.
So they've baited you with the simple fact and switched it for the giant theory.
Precisely. They trick you. And the counter tactic is just to stop everything. You don't even argue the facts.
You just have to say, hold on.
You just use the word evolution twice. Which definition are we actually debating right now?
That's so powerful. And you see it everywhere. Someone says we need to defend freedom.
Oh, all the time.
And you have to stop and ask, are we talking economic liberty or the political freedom to protest? They're not the same thing.
If you don't nail down the definition, you're not even in the same conversation. And that failure of clarity, well, it leads us right into the second trap.
The no true Scotsman fallacy.
Right.
This one is, I think, even more specific. It's a technique for moving the goalposts to protect a generalization that's just been proven wrong.
Yeah, the original story makes it so clear.
So Scotsman A says, no Scotsman puts sugar on his porridge. Just a broad generalization.
And then Scotsman B says, well, hold on, my Uncle Angus is a Scotsman, and he loves sugar on his porridge. He provides a direct counterexample.
And this is where the error happens. Instead of admitting he was wrong, Scotsman A just changes the definition of the group.
He says, "Ah, but no true Scotsman puts sugar on his porridge."
He just kicks Uncle Angus out of the club to save his original statement.
He protects the generalization by making it unfalsifiable. Now, this gets really complex when you apply it to the real world.
Okay, like what?
Think about debates over history. Someone says, Christians have done terrible things like the Crusades or the witch trials.
And the immediate defense you hear is, well, those weren't real Christians.
And that sounds exactly like the fallacy we just described.
Yeah.
It's a very dangerous path because you're just dismissing data you don't like.
So how do you counter that without committing the fallacy yourself? There has to be a fix.
There is. And the fix is this. It is not a fallacy to appeal to the standard.
What do you mean by the standard?
You accept the label they use. You say, okay, they call themselves Christians. But then you measure their actions against the objective, stated teachings of Christianity itself.
The rule book.
The rule book. If the text says love your enemy, and their actions were to kill their enemy, then they were objectively failing the standard, regardless of the label they wore. That distinction is everything.
That is the key. So it's for you listening right now, here's the actionable assignment. The next time you're heading into a tough conversation.
Stop before you even start.
And require your opponent to define their terms.
Absolutely. Make them define atheist. Does it mean I believe there is no God or just I lack a belief in God? They are fundamentally different positions.
Make them define woman. Make them define freedom.
That clarity prevents the entire trick from even starting.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to take away. If you cannot define the term, you cannot debate the term. Go explore what that principle means for the discussions you are having right now.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a logical landmine. It's something that just explodes daily in our news feeds, in arguments, and even inside our own heads.
It's that core idea that if one thing happens, then another thing happens right after.
The first one must have caused the second.
Exactly.
And you see this everywhere, right? Those wild statistics, like since we introduced this new policy, X has gone up 50%.
Right.
We need a way to just instantly see the flaw in that.
Yeah.
So that's our mission today, to spot this false cause fallacy out in the wild.
And there's a great Latin phrase for it, if you want to sound philosophical. It's post hoc ergo propter hoc.
Which means?
It literally means after this, therefore, because of this. The error is right there in the name. You're assuming that sequence in time proves causality, but it just doesn't.
Okay, let's break that down with the classic illustration. The rooster and the sun.
Yes.
So every single morning, without fail, the rooster crows.
Yeah.
And then what happens?
The sun rises.
The sun rises. If you didn't know anything about astrophysics and you just watch that happen day after day.
The conclusion would seem completely obvious. The rooster is making the sun come up.
But if you, say, got rid of the rooster,
the sun would still rise. There's no actual mechanism connecting the crowing to the solar system. The two events are correlated, but that's it.
And this is that foundational rule in statistics, isn't it?
It is. Correlation does not imply causation. I mean, the notorious example is ice cream sales and shark attacks.
Right.
Both spike in the summer, the lines on the graph go up together, but one doesn't cause the other. Warm weather is the real cause, driving people to the beach and to buy ice cream.
So if it's that simple with ice cream and sharks, where does this kind of thinking get, well, more insidious? Where does it show up in these really high-level arguments?
It creates some very sophisticated traps. You see, it often comes up in what's called the God of the Gaps critique.
Okay, what's that?
Well, the argument goes something like this. Ancient people, they didn't understand lightning, so they invented Zeus to explain it.
An explanation for a gap in their knowledge.
Precisely. Therefore, the argument concludes, religion is fundamentally caused by ignorance.
But wait, the source material we looked at pushes back on that pretty hard, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It says that by making that claim, you're almost making a post hoc error yourself.
Exactly. Just because some pagan superstitions faded as science advanced doesn't mean all belief is caused by ignorance. I mean, our sources point out that many founders of modern science, like Newton or Kepler,
Right.
they saw their scientific work as flowing directly from their theology, not in spite of it. So to claim ignorance is the single cause of belief. That's just misreading a really long and complicated timeline.
And we see that same powerful emotional use of a timeline in social critiques.
Oh, absolutely.
Take the Christian nation argument you sometimes hear. In 1950, America was, overwhelmingly Christian and crime was low. Today, faith is less central, crime is higher.
And that timeline, it feels undeniable, especially to people who live through it.
It does. It feels like direct cause and effect.
And that's the trap. While, sure, societal morality is a factor, you can't just prove causation by pointing at two trends moving in opposite directions. You have to ask, what else was happening?
Yeah.
Massive economic shifts, urbanization, the introduction of widespread drugs, changes in law and policing. The decline in faith is just one variable among, dozens that could influence crime rates.
So if this trips us up with big public policy debates, how does it skew our own personal reasoning?
This is where we run into a related error, sometimes called the Texas sharpshooter.
The Texas sharpshooter.
Yeah, the idea is you fire a bunch of bullets at the side of a barn, then you go up to the barn, find the tightest cluster of bullet holes, and then you paint the bullseye around them.
Huh. So you claim you have perfect aim after the fact.
Exactly. You're defining the pattern after you see the outcome. And we do this to ourselves when we count the hits and ignore the misses, especially with things like belief or ritual.
So a skeptic might say, I prayed for a bike and I didn't get one.
But the believer counters, but I prayed for my grandma and she got better.
And by focusing only on the grandma, only on that one successful anecdote,
you're treating prayer like a vending machine. You're claiming a mechanical causality that makes you really vulnerable to that post hoc attack. You're drawing the bullseye after the fact.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the takeaway for you listening right now? We're calling it the superstition check.
I like that.
The next time you attribute a success to some small ritual like you wore your lucky socks and your team won, just ask yourself, is there any real physical mechanism connecting those two things? Or is it just a classic case of post hoc or go propter hoc?
And here's a final, maybe more provocative thought to leave you with. Given how often correlation is weaponized as causation in the media to push an agenda, what widely accepted public argument out there about health or the economy or anything else might just be the rooster taking credit for the sunrise? What stands out to you?
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking that stack of research you sent over and turning it into a mental toolkit.
A shortcut, really.
Exactly. A shortcut to recognizing bad arguments.
Yeah.
Our mission here is to dissect the common logical errors that spring from, well, a very human reflex.
The need to spot patterns fast.
Right.
We're targeting what's called hasty generalization. That's when the brain sees just one example. A dog bites you and immediately wants to conclude all dogs are dangerous.
It's a survival instinct.
It is. It's survival wiring overriding solid logic. Our brains just love these shortcuts, even when they lead us way off track.
And the material you found gives us this perfect real-world illustration. They call it the bad Christian argument. Someone just refuses to engage with the whole worldview because of one flawed person, like a pastor who stole money.
And the conclusion is all Christians are hypocrites. It's a sample size of one applied to, 2 billion people? It's absurd.
So the counter logic is what?
The key insight here is that logic demands we judge a philosophy by its tenets.
Its principles.
Yes, not by the actions of a few bad actors. Think about it like this. If a doctor commits malpractice, we blame the doctor. We don't abandon the entire field of medicine.
You abandon the practitioner, not the practice.
Precisely. You have to apply that same discipline when you're evaluating any large group or, any belief system.
Okay, so if hasty generalization is jumping the gun on small data, what about when we start mixing up the definitions of the groups themselves? Let's move to the fallacy of composition.
Right. Composition assumes that what's true of the parts must also be true of the whole.
The classic example being the brick and the wall.
That's the one. A single brick is small and light. The wall is made of those bricks, therefore the wall itself must be small and light.
It falls apart immediately. It's ridiculous.
If it gets sneaky in rhetoric, it's everywhere.
So, like the argument that everything in the universe requires a cause.
Therefore, the universe itself requires a cause. That's a textbook compositional error.
And this is where Bertrand Russell comes in with that famous counterpoint.
Exactly. Russell said, just because every human has a mother doesn't mean the human race as a whole has a mother.
You can't just scale up a property of the part and apply it to the whole.
You can't. And what's really interesting, what we found in the research, is that a lot of modern thinkers saw that rebuttal coming.
Oh, that's fascinating. So they pivot.
They move the argument away from composition and over to entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. They say the universe is running down, which means it must have had a beginning.
So they sidestep the whole trap.
Right. Which shows that understanding these fallacies is also about anticipating the stronger arguments people shift to.
Okay, so if you get composition, then the fallacy of division is just The reverse.
It's the mirror image. Assuming what's true of the whole must be true for each individual part.
So the United States is the wealthiest country. Therefore, this one homeless man in New York must be wealthy.
It doesn't work. The average of the group doesn't define the individual, and this gets used in what you could call the science trap. Well, you hear the collective entity science has disproven God.
Right.
And the implication then becomes that every single scientist must therefore be an atheist.
But the data you share with us paints a very different picture.
It does. Our sources show that roughly 40, maybe 50% of scientists actually profess a belief in a higher power. It just shows how division can be used as this rhetorical sledgehammer.
Using the supposed consensus of the whole to crush the part, the individual who might disagree.
That's it.
So what this all comes down to is these fallacies are traps. They turn nuance into stereotypes.
They teach us to judge tenets over practitioners, parts over wholes. It's powerful knowledge for filtering all the noise out there.
So here's a final challenge for you listening. The next time you watch a political debate, any side, just count how many times you hear a speaker refer to millions of people using these huge generalizations, words like
They always or never.
exactly.
Every time you hear liberals always do X or conservatives never believe Y, you're actually witnessing a hasty generalization live, in action.
You'll be surprised how often that one error is the entire foundation of their argument. Have you ever been watching, say, a high-stakes interview on the news? Or maybe you're in a meeting
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
and the person on the other side is just talking so fast you can't even think, let alone get a word in.
Right. It feels like you're being attacked with information.
Exactly. Well, that feeling is what we're diving into today. We want to help you recognize and neutralize some of these high-pressure tactics.
These aren't about persuasion. They're about overwhelming your mental bandwidth.
We're going to unpack two as big ones, the Gish Gallop and the steamroller.
And that's really the key insight here. Both of these tactics, they aim to win on exhaustion and time.
Not on truth.
Not at all. It's about forcing you to use all your energy just defending yourself. But once you can name what's happening, you start to take back control.
Okay, so let's start with the first one, the Gish Gallop.
It's a memorable name.
It is. It's named after a creationist, Dwayne Gish, who is apparently a master of this.
So what is it exactly?
It's basically a fire hose of falsehoods. You drown your opponent in this flood of, weak arguments, half-truths, rapid-fire accusations, just one after another with no break.
And the math behind why it works is, well, it's just brutal.
How so?
Think of it this way. Your opponent makes, say, 10 separate claims in 60 seconds.
Oh.
Now, if it takes you 2 minutes of solid-sourced logic to properly refute just one of those claims,
Oh, I see where this is going.
you now need 20 minutes to deal with their 1 minute of speech. You will always run out of time.
And then they can just say, see, they couldn't answer my questions.
They claim victory every time.
That pressure to answer everything, that's what sinks people, isn't it?
It's the trap.
So the biggest takeaway for you listening right now is this. Do not try to answer everything. If you chase every rabbit down its hole, you lose.
You need a targeted strategy. We call it the point and drill tactic.
Point and drill. Okay, what are the steps?
3 steps. First, and this is crucial, you have to call it out.
You just name it for the audience.
Yes. You pause and you say clearly, that is a Gish Gallop. It's a tactic designed to avoid scrutiny, and we can't have a serious discussion at this speed.
But doesn't that look like you're dodging the other 9 points they made?
That's where step 2 comes in. We call it the sniper shot.
Oh,
You ignore their giant list, and you pick the single weakest, most absurd point they made.
for example.
Let's say buried in their list is the claim that carbon dating is a fraud. You grab that one claim and you drill down on it.
Because it's easily and factually provable.
Exactly. If you can show they are fundamentally, demonstrably wrong on that one fact, you've just destroyed their credibility on everything else they said.
So you're not just refuting the claim, you're undermining their entire authority.
Precisely. And that leads to step 3, the pivot.
Don't let them change the subject.
You absolutely refuse to let them gallop away. You stay on that point until it's dismantled, and then you put the ball in their court. You say, okay, what's your next strongest point? You control the pace now.
Okay, that's incredibly useful. So if the Gish Gallop is about the sheer volume of claims, what about the steamroller?
The steamroller is simpler. It's the interrupter, the person who just talks over you constantly.
We've all seen that.
Oh, yeah. And the psychology there is so interesting. The person steamrolling you, they are afraid of silence.
Afraid of silence. Why?
Because silence gives the audience a moment to think, to actually process what you just said. Noise is their defense against scrutiny.
So how do you handle it? We've got 3 ways.
Let's hear them.
First is the broken record. You don't get angry. You don't raise your voice. You just calmly repeat, I am not finished.
I am not finished, over and over.
Exactly. The second one can be even more powerful, especially if you're on camera. It's the freeze.
You just stop talking.
Completely. You stop, you turn, you look at them, and you just let the silence hang in the air.
Oh, that gets awkward fast.
It gets intensely awkward, and the audience immediately sees who the rude one is.
Okay, what's the third one?
The third one really flips the power dynamic. We call it the teacher voice.
So you don't get louder.
No, you get quieter, you drop your pitch, you speak slower, and you project authority. And then you hit them with a rhetorical question.
Like what?
Something like, Sir, I listened to you for 2 full minutes without an interruption. Are you afraid to let me speak for 30 seconds?
Wow. That's powerful. It really all comes down to recognition, doesn't it?
Once you see the tactic for what it is, you don't get paralyzed by it. You can act.
So, as a final thought for everyone listening, when you're observing one of these high-speed, high-stakes debates,
Whether it's political, in your office, wherever.
just ask yourself one simple question. Is all this speed being used to clarify the truth? Or is it designed purely to overwhelm?
And always remember,
Speed is not intelligence. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've got a great topic today, looking at the art of persuasion.
right?
And the core idea that jumps out from all the material you sent over is that having a perfect logical argument, well, it just isn't enough.
It really isn't. And that's the tough truth about human nature. You know, we're emotional beings. We found that people often vote for or agree with the person they like.
The person who just feels right, not the one who's technically correct.
Exactly. So our mission today is to pull out the practical tactics from this material. We're going to focus on 2 big ones, frame control and something called optical persuasion.
Okay, let's start with frame control. I love this quote from the source. He who defines the frame wins the game.
It's so true.
So what exactly is the frame here? What are we talking about?
The frame is basically the unstated assumption of the conversation. It's the context. And if you walk into a debate and just accept your opponent's frame, you've pretty much already lost.
I saw a really powerful political example of this.
Yes, the abortion debate example. It illustrates this perfectly. So one side frames it as, this is a baby, is it okay to kill a baby?
Okay.
But the other side frames it as, this is my body. Does the government have the right to control my organs? They are 2 completely different battlefields.
And if you're the pro-choice person arguing about when a fetus becomes a baby, you're fighting inside their frame.
You're already on the back foot,
Yeah.
which is why the key tactic is to reframe.
Yeah.
You have to refuse their starting point.
So if someone asks a loaded question like, why do you hate women's freedom?
You just don't answer it. You pivot.
Yeah.
You challenge the frame itself. The material suggests saying something like, I love freedom, but does freedom include the right to stop a beating heart? That's the real question.
Well, yeah, I see. You've completely shifted the ground. So what about those smaller traps, the gotcha questions?
Classic, have you stopped beating your wife kind of question.
Right, where a yes or no is an admission of guilt. How do you get out of that?
You use something called the pivot. The key is to address the intent of the question, not the literal words.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, there was this theological trap question. Do you think Hindus are going to hell? Saying yes makes you sound like a bigot, but saying no might betray your doctrine.
So you're stuck.
But you're not. The pivot answer was brilliant. It went something like, I believe that God is the perfect judge. My job isn't to play judge. My job is to share the message of Jesus, which I believe is the truth.
Okay, but hold on. Isn't that just dodging the question?
It's a fair point, but it's different. You're addressing the underlying concern, which is about judgment and faith, while rejecting the trap.
Yeah.
You answer the question about your beliefs without letting them define you as hostile.
That's a very sharp distinction. Okay, let's move on to the nonverbal stuff. Optical persuasion.
Because if you look nervous, none of the verbal tricks will work.
Right. And there were 3 really simple tips for this. The first was eye contact.
Yes. And crucially, look at the audience, so the camera or look at your opponent. Never the moderator. It makes them seem irrelevant and puts you in control.
Number 2 was the smile. Specifically, smiling when you're being attacked.
It's so powerful. Just the slight calm smile that sends a message, your attacks don't hurt me, and it just completely deflates their aggression.
And the last one, which I found surprising, was a pen.
The pen, yes.
Why a pen?
It does two things. First, just holding it can stop your hands from shaking. But second, it gives you a small, authoritative prop to gesture with. It projects calm and control.
So when you put it all together, you have a pretty serious toolkit.
It's the whole spectrum, really. You have logic to find the truth, fallacy detection to spot errors, and then rhetoric to actually persuade someone's heart.
And this is where it all comes together with a sense of responsibility, because these are powerful tools. They aren't just for, crushing an opponent in an argument.
No, the ultimate goal presented in the material is much higher than that. It's not about winning an argument. It's about potentially winning a brother.
What does that mean exactly?
It means the true measure of success isn't whether you humiliated someone. It's whether you use these tools so skillfully and respectfully that you actually led someone to reconsider their position, to see things a new way. And that, I think, is the real purpose of learning all this. Today, we are strapping in for the ultimate deep dive, a genuine shortcut to decoding any argument you might run into.
Exactly. We've gone through the source material on professional debating tactics to give you the blueprint.
A blueprint. I like that.
Yeah, the very architecture of an effective argument. And we've boiled it down into 3 things for you. The structures for your own arguments, a hit list of flaws to spot in others, and then the strategic moves.
Okay, so let's start with the structures, the good stuff. The absolute foundation seems to be modus ponens.
It is. It's so simple. People use it without even realizing it. If P, then QP happens. So Q must be true.
Right. If I leave the window open, that's P. The cat will get out. That's Q. I left the window open.
Cat's gone. Simple. But the real power move, what the source material actually calls the destroyer, is modus tollens.
The destroyer. Okay, tell me about that.
It just flips it. It lets you tear down an argument by looking at the result. So if P, then Q. But, and this is the key, Q is not true.
So P can't be true either.
Exactly. If this new policy works, P, then the economy improves. Q, well, we look around and the economy has not improved. Not Q.
Therefore, the policy didn't work. Not P. That's incredibly clean.
It's devastatingly effective.
Okay, so now we switch from building to demolishing. Let's get to that fallacy hit list.
Yeah.
The cheap shots first. Attack fallacies. Everyone knows the basic ad hominem.
Attacking the person, not the argument. But there's a more, I'd say, insidious version in the source material called bulverism.
Bulverism?
Yeah, it's where you explain why someone is wrong before you've even proven that they're wrong. You go straight for their presumed motive.
So, you only believe that because you're greedy or you just want to crutch, you're psychoanalyzing them instead of debating them?
Precisely. You completely bypass the actual argument. Now, if they can't attack you, they often try to just overwhelm you.
Which brings us to distraction and overload. The Gish Gallop.
Ah, yes. The Gish Gallop. It's an avalanche of, frankly, weak points. The goal isn't to be right, it's to exhaust you.
Because you have to spend 5 minutes refuting one stupid sentence they said.
Right, and while you do that, they've already thrown out 5 more, so how do you even fight that?
With a tactical maneuver. The material calls it the point and drill.
And it's a great name for it.
You pick their single, weakest, most ridiculous point. You destroy it completely. And then you refuse to move on. You just hold their feet to the fire on that one failure.
It's a way to force rigor where there is none. And speaking of intellectual sloppiness, we have to quickly mention no true Scotsman.
Oh, that's when they just changed the definition to save their argument.
Oh.
No true Scotsman puts sugar on his porridge. Well, my friend Angus does. Well, no true Scotsman does.
Exactly. They just move the goalposts. It's a way to make their claim impossible to falsify.
All right, let's get to the advanced stuff, the maneuvers that really show you know what you're doing. First up, the steel man.
This is such a power move. Instead of attacking a weak version of their argument, you actually state their argument better than they did. You make it stronger.
And then you dismantle it. It just completely neutralizes any claim that you're arguing in bad faith.
It shows incredible credibility. And on the flip side, if you think their entire premise is wrong, you use the frame check. You just reject the question itself.
Redefine the actual issue. But I think the most powerful tool for everyday use is the burden shift.
Absolutely. The person who makes the claim has to provide the evidence. You just lean on Hitchens's razor.
That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
It's so simple, but so important. And when you put all this together, the structure, the traps, the maneuvers, you start to see the architecture of every conversation you're in.
You really do. You can see if it's built on solid rock or
Yeah.
just sand. Which brings us to a final thought for you to chew on.
Mm-hmm.
The source material talks a lot about using the burden shift and Hitchens' razor on other people's claims. But what happens when you apply that exact same rigor to your own core beliefs? What evidence do you actually need to go find to back up your own personal P's and Q's?